Heyo, folks, and welcome to Boldly Go, my new Kerbal Space Program series. Kerbal Space Program is a game that I love dearly, and I didn't actually know if I would ever do a series for KSP on this channel. As some of you know, if you're returning viewers, I kind of branded myself as a city skylines or otherwise city building game YouTuber, but with the death of Octon and how difficult it is for me to get back into City Skylines after that game, or excuse me, after my Octon save crashed. I feel like it's time for me to explore different games that I love on this channel. And regardless, I mean, this channel will always be a place where I am doing things that I enjoy, that I'm interested in, and while I love the world of Laurentia and will obviously be continuing developing it in future projects, for now I want to branch beyond it for a little bit. So, To Boldly Go is a modded Kerbal Space Program series with a focus on realism, exploration, and historical content. So, unlike normal Kerbal Space Program, where your first rocket is probably going to be manned, we are doing a historical approach where we are instead using sounding rockets. These basic rockets are essentially little more than just fireworks, and were the first sort of rockets launched by both NASA in the early days and indeed the Soviet Union. Of course, we are in the fictional Kerbal universe, which we will see developed as I create lore for it later. But for now, we are using these extremely basic rockets to get our first contracts done and do our first science experiments. As you can see, it is day 1 of the space program, and we have just created Gaia 1. A simple two-stage rocket, single-stage rocket. This spacecraft is, again, just basically little more than an avionics module stacked on top of a really big firework. But yeah, this series takes place within the Kerbal universe, but as it is modded, I decided to go away from the stock system. We are using the planet pack JNSQ by Galileo, which is a much more difficult version than the stock game. All the planets are 2.7 times stock. And later on in the series, as we become more advanced, we will be adding in other planet packs for us to begin to go interstellar. At least that's the hope. As you will see later in this episode, things for the Union space program, that is what we are playing as, are a little rocky to start off. But with our first craft created and ready to launch, we now go to the main menu where we are warping ahead. Gaia 1 is completed on 20th of January, 892, and will be launched on a stormy night. Or at least it would be if I remembered to record the footage. Unfortunately, after I got this cinematic shot, I launched my hard drive ran out of space. So the actual launch in the middle of the night was not recorded. Unfortunately, it's not like you really would have been able to see much. But it did go off, it did land successfully. And it gave us the required science to build a little bigger. As you can see down there at the bottom left, our funds are much higher than when we started out with, as we managed to complete a couple of contracts that I took off camera. As a result, Gaia 2, what we are building now, will be a little bit bigger than Gaia 1. It'll actually be a two-stage rocket, featuring what you can see right there, a little camera. Gaia 2 is going to have a lot more in the way of science experiments. And yeah, more or less, it's a very similar design to Gaia 1, just simply with 2 stages and a bit bigger of a payload. Gotta add on the flag there. I created the flag of the Union, that is the country we're in, and the Union space program. Myself, unfortunately, because of how Kerbal Space Program does aspect ratios for flags, it's a little warped on the rocket, but when you see it on the flagstaff and in the background of the VAB, you will see that, like, you know, it is an actual proper 2x1 flag. But yeah, that's about it, and let's go to launch on 27th of January 892. First pictures from up in the air from our space program, Gaia 2 goes off more or less without a hitch. It unfortunately goes a little lower than we would have expected, unfortunately, but this is certainly a great next step in our space program. As we begin to come down for a landing, you can see the very basic space center there in the background. With the science that we've collected over Gaia 1 and 2, we're also able to go into our tech tree. As you can see, it looks a lot different than the stock game because we are using the community tech tree with slow progression. The unmanned before manned mod. So, like I said, we're going to be playing a lot with probe cores before we ever get our first manned capsules. Here you can see me trying to figure out where we get our first fairing. This will release us from the constraints of those pre-made sounding rocket fairings and allow us to begin making our first real big boy rockets. Coming back into the VAB to start designing Gaia 3. Once again, it's a very simple rocket, but with the new technology that we just unlocked in the tech tree, we have access to a slightly larger solid sounding rocket motor. This will allow us to just take up a little bit more up into the atmosphere, more science experiments, more battery capacity, that's for sure, because we are running into issues of running out of battery while we are running the experiments up in the atmosphere. As a result, about half of the payload capacity of this rocket is literally just batteries. The other half is, of course, our science experiments. This design is really not that much of a deviation from not the normal design, our previous two designs. Just a lot bigger, with a lot more packed in, including, as you can see there, our first antenna to try to transmit some of the science, because we're also running into data storage capacity. That is something we have to worry about. We are playing with Kerbalism, which is a life support and realism overhaul mod that adds things like radiation, life support requirements, and data transmission. So we are going to have to actually keep track of how much data that we are able to store in our probe cores and how much we are able to transmit, because we will run into cases in the future where we may not be able to run science experiments or else we will run out of data storage. So we'll have to prioritize certain experiments over others. With Gaia 3 on the pad, we are once again ready to launch. I apologize for the cursor on the screen. This happens a couple more times. But yeah. Getting up to roughly 8,000 meters, Gaia 3 is a much larger success than its previous iteration, with some beautiful shots while we're high up in the atmosphere. Floating down slowly, we're able to collect plenty of data as our experiments run in the background, and be able to get these beautiful shots of the upper atmosphere. I can imagine the Kerbals in the mission control watching in awe as the small television camera on Gaia 3 broadcasts all of these images live for all to see. Truly a great accomplishment for the USP, or it would be if the recording didn't suddenly cut out as the payload bay was destroyed on touchdown. We cut back to the VAB as we begin to design Gaia 4 a little bit lighter, a little bit leaner, in order to hopefully compensate for the rough touchdown and allow the little parachute on board to actually bring us in for a softer landing. With the rough touchdown of Gaia 3, we unfortunately got no science from the previous launch, and with the fact that we have a contract presently to escape the atmosphere, no science and a low apoapsis of only 8,000 meters, only 1/10 of the way to space, means that we are on track to lose a lot of money on the next launches if we can't collect science to improve our rocket technology. Gaia 4 hopefully intends to improve on the failures of Gaia 3 with a beautiful launch resulting once again in some beautiful views. Only a marginal improvement in height, however. But with a soft touchdown later on, we were able to collect the science to use in our next iteration. Once again, we are back to the VAB for Gaia 5. Unfortunately, I find out pretty quickly that these larger payload fairings, this is, I want to say, 0.625 meters in diameter, well, they're really not worth all the hassle. The parachute for this diameter is actually only as strong as the parachute for the previous diameter, meaning that even though we have a larger payload bay, we can only really carry about the same amount of mass, or else, once again, we will be having some hard touchdowns. You'll see this in the, I believe, spoilers. This is actually, once again, a rocket that will yield us no science as Gaia 5 touches down hard and the payload bay is destroyed along with all of the juicy science contained within. This begins a trend of trial and error that will nearly sap us dry. As we continue building the rocket, I want to talk a little bit about the series. So this series will actually have a little bit of lore. In the early game here, you see me rapidly building rockets and launching, but as time goes on, we will be having significantly fewer launches per episode as our launches become more and more complex, and we have to bounce back and forth between active missions. Unlike normal Kerbal Space Program, where you basically play a mission through to the end, there will be a lot of cases where we have several active missions going on at once. We may be actively controlling a probe launch at the start of an episode before jumping over to the landing of a rover as it comes into Duna, or having to manage a manned mission through several episodes as we go about our day-to-day activities otherwise. So yeah, as we finish up this probe, we see the start of us using more, I suppose, typical rocket components. These parts are part of the stock game. I am, however, using Restock, a part aesthetics mod. You can see me here struggling to figure out what the hell is going on with this camera, because it seems that despite the fact I placed it on the payload bay, its root part is the small booster, and somehow the root part of the two boosters became the camera. I don't exactly know what happened there, but I had to basically scrap the whole rocket just to move the camera back into the payload bay. You'll have to excuse all of the numbers up at the top. I have no idea how bad or how I got off so badly on my labeling system in the VAB. But whatever I put at the start of each launch is the official launch date and name of the mission. So I'll have to go into the VAB at some point and figure out all the launch numbers. So today, on, I suppose, Valencurb's day of 892, we launch Gaia 5. At first, everything looks to be going beautifully. This mission would have been a massive success, with a larger diameter rocket, testing new engines, and going higher than ever before. We were able to see some beautiful views from Gaia 5. As we get higher and higher into the atmosphere, we're able to get more and more science as we go into different biome, or the flying high scenario for science experiments, which yields us even more science for us to use on our program. Launching the second stage here, though, and we begin to see a problem. The second stage is tumbling a little bit, and will begin to lean over more and more as it gets deflected by gravity. Essentially, there's nothing, with this being an uncontrolled rocket, there's really nothing I can do to stop this, except just watch where it goes. Despite this, we still get a lot higher than we did with Gaia 4, up to 10,281 meters. We are seeing an improvement, and unfortunately, we also see a lot of our science getting deleted. You can see me here just kind of staring at the screen, being confused on what happened. So, how can we fix this? My first thought was, well, what if we just landed in the water? So here you see me playing with the launch sticks that come with the Sounding Rockets pack, and placing them here on our rocket and making sure that everything will be balanced so it doesn't tip over once we start launching. This is what Gaia 6 will be. But yeah, everything seems to be balanced, and on only 4 days later, we launch this. And unfortunately, I seem to have accidentally made the world's first ICBM. So we gracefully come in for a rapid, unscheduled disassembly as the pieces of the rocket just litter the ground. A meager height of 503 meters. With the same design, just not tilted, we launch Gaia 7. The fins of this rocket are ever so slightly tilted. That way, as we begin to speed up, the drag from the wings will cause the rocket to spin. This stabilizes the rocket, allowing it to stay much straighter and fighting the urge of gravity to have it tilt over. Even still, once we get to our second stage, drag causes the craft to eventually stop spinning, which will allow it to tip over. But with just that little bit of spin at the start of the second stage, we are able to go much higher. "16,000 meters. We're making progress incrementally. Unfortunately, this doesn't make it out to sea, and once again, the payload bay explodes once we touch down. Let's take a little break. We have a contract to break the sound barrier. Unfortunately, with our current tech progression, we only have access to this little capsule, the most basic landing gear, and the little Juno engine. I seem to have lost a little bit of the recording, but as you can see, we're making the wings of this craft out of winglets. I just have several of them pieced together. It does create an interesting wing shape, which I do actually really like. A bit of a almost like moth look to it. And with these 4 jet engines, we will hopefully be able to break the sound barrier. The question is landing. With these spindly little landing legs, or landing gear, fixed landing gear, I do not trust myself whatsoever to land on the bumpy level 1 runway at the Space Center. With that now in the construction queue, we come back to the VAB to once again work on another iteration of the rocket. With the first airplane our program has ever designed built, we have access to those elevons, which will allow us to have a degree of active control in the launching of a rocket, which will no doubt be very useful. Gaia 7 launches without a hitch and manages to go straight up this time, something our program felt very accomplished for. And with the second stage being launched itself with having little fins, the issue of tilting over is a much smaller problem. 18,000 meters. Once again, a small but incremental improvement. With the success of the previous mission, we're able to invest a little more in new technologies that will allow us to build bigger and better, and allow us to design this rocket here, which we will see come in a little bit later, which will be our first 3-stage rocket, by simply adding on another sounding rocket stage up at the top. With that complete, we come back to Gaia 9, launching on the 16th of Eris 892. Exactly same as the previous launch, Gaia 9 is by far up to this point our most successful mission. Launching higher than ever before and managing to stay straight for reasons that I'm not entirely sure about, we are able to get this view as we come back down from the highest apoapsis we have yet achieved, breaking the 20,000 meter mark. Taking a little break from rocket launches, we launch the Thybird C-100. This is a not entirely pleasant craft to fly as we speed up the recording just a smidgen. As you can see, it's incredibly unwieldy to fly, as the little winglets like to bend and flex under aerodynamic pressure. We fly out over the ocean just in case we lose our wings. We have at least some chance of surviving, because I certainly do not want to lose Jebediah here. Diving down from a bit of a height, we are able to cross 343 meters a second, as you saw just there, and because of how unwieldy this is, I decide to land it over the water in a bit of a rough landing here. Poor Jeb gets knocked out from the touchdown, but we are on to Gaia 10. This is the 3-stage rocket that we designed a little earlier, a usual touchdown that gets us far higher than we ever have been before, 55,000 meters. At the height of our space program, however, everything begins to go wrong. I expected Gaia 17 to fail, just like all the previous launches up to this point. However, I quickly took manual control after that intro cinematic, and managed to keep it from falling over this time. For the first time, we are using a liquid fuel rocket instead of a solid fuel rocket to boost us up as high as possible, needing desperately to break the atmosphere in order to complete our contract. Gaia 17 was the last launch that we could do before running into bankruptcy. If Gaia 17 fails, the series is over, effectively. Luckily, as you probably can tell by now, there's still 5 minutes left in the video. Though the third stage of Gaia 17 tumbles uncontrollably, the second stage, sounding rocket motor, boosts us well out of the atmosphere. And though the probe tumbles up in space, we did, in fact, break out of the atmosphere, achieving a monumental apoapsis of 226,052 meters. As we come back in, we see for the first time re-entry effects. The Firefly mod had just came out when this episode was recorded, and I intended to use it. But as we come in, we look once again through the camera as we break through the cloud layers. What was a stormy day turned out to be one of the best days for our program. As we break through the storm clouds, we get a beautiful view of the sky and sea below. Thunder ringing in the distance as we come in nice and gently for a water landing. Gaia 17 was a breakthrough for the program. Though we're still on shaky ground, we have the ability now to at least escape the atmosphere. We know that. And with another variation on the craft, by changing out a little bit the payload design, we're able to not only have active control on the upper two stages, but we are about to start attempting to go orbital. We know that the third stage of Gaia 17 effectively was useless, but with RCS we now have active control, leading us up to Gaia 18. On the 12th of John, 892, we begin our first orbital attempt. Everything goes flawlessly. Only problem? Not enough fuel. 700 meters short of orbit. Yet, we get a stunning view of Kerbin and its curvature. Believing that I just need to pilot a little better, we move on now to Gaia 19. The order placed at the same time as the previous launch, we are able to get it out extremely quickly and go for our next attempt. Piloting, indeed, was one of the problems of Gaia 18, but piloting alone wasn't the issue. 300 meters short. Gaia 20, I thought for certain, was going to be the final rocket, but no, once again, 200 meters short. So we come back to the VAB for a quick redesign. I realized that I really don't need a parachute, do I, if I'm just staying in orbit? And, well, if I don't need a parachute, then I really don't need a fairing. So within the little nose cone is contained a simple battery and the avionics module. The payload is effectively just the nose cone for this orbital attempt. No science, no camera. We just want orbit. But I mount the avionics module the wrong way. As a result, there's no control. I cannot pitch this thing the way I want, and it is just flying wherever kind of it feels like. Gaia 20 is a failure. Gaia 23, however, launches beautifully. Our next orbital attempt has everything going for it. We'll just have to see if it makes it this time. As the camera rotates, we know we've made it to orbit. A monumental achievement. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I will be back soon for episode 2. Please do like and subscribe, and let me know what y'all think. Have a good one. Hope to see you again.